Hi, everybody. Welcome in. It is time for the Kansas State edition of Three Guys Before the Game. Thank you so much for being with us. In studio with the Senator, Brad Howe, and the Dean, Hoppy Kercheval. And at long last, West Virginia's football team is ready to go into action on Saturday at 3:30. It's the Mountaineers against the Wildcats of Kansas State. And thanks so much for being with us. So, after a long delay, it's WVU and KSU as West Virginia opens up its seventh season in the Big 12 Conference. Coming up on our program here today, we'll break it down in detail. We've had the opportunity to hear from both sides over the last couple of days. Injury news and notes from the Kansas State camp, which seem to be significant on their defensive side. And then, how does Kansas State beat you? How has West Virginia beaten Kansas State in each of the last 2 years? And can it happen for a third straight year? First question, fellas. Would you agree that West Virginia seems to be in its best position ever in the previous 6 encounters in the Big 12 to win this game?
Absolutely, because the first 4 times Kansas State won, the last 2 times West Virginia won in close games. But those were this is a better West Virginia team, I think, than Kansas State has faced before, number one, particularly offensively. And second of all, this is not the Kansas State that we have known in previous years. And normally you associate Bill Snyder with a well-coached physical team, Brad, with some skill guys, but also big up-front guys. We've watched them a couple of times. You look at their stats. You talk about their injuries, which we'll get into. They're not. They are barely average, and they are struggling right now on both sides of the ball.
I agree with you, Hoppy. And Tony, to answer that question, I'll echo what Hoppy said. I think it's both. The gap is even wider than it's been on both sides. So, yeah, West Virginia's better. K-State doesn't look like the same team. I think this will prove to be an interesting test of – we talk a lot about history against certain programs versus, well, does that really have anything to do with this year's game? I think today or Saturday is a good example of that because West Virginia has really struggled against Kansas State, even in wins, averaging just 19 points a game against them since joining the Big 12, the lowest of any Big 12 team.
Well, remember, K-State was driving to win the game last year.
Well, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago.
Field goal. Yeah.
And as you say, and we're going to talk about this, I think there is a greater separation now than any time in this series.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, last year was 28-23 was the final. So you're right. I mean, it did come down as well to tight games have been the standard in this. The big question that they have in Manhattan is why? Offensively, they returned 9 starters. They thought that they were going to be really good. We had Wyatt Thompson, their play-by-play announcer, on earlier this week, and he said, I was actually thinking before the season started that the preseason media poll was undervaluing Kansas State. They had them at 6, and he thought, all right, we're going to be pretty good here. But for some reason, they have not been pounding it. The thing you got to look at is, okay, you got 9 guys back. The change in coordinators.
That's the biggest thing to me. I'll go further real quick on not just the 9 guys back. How about this? They return every start along the offensive line from last year. 65 out of a possible 65 starts return. The only time under Bill Snyder that has happened. So normally when you think of Kansas State, if they have an experienced, good offensive line, that's when they're at their best, and that just hasn't happened. I think you're right, Tony. I think you go right back to the coordinator position. This is the first time since 97 that Bill Snyder, in the middle of his tenure, so he's been there twice, without starting the season or starting his tenure, he has different coordinators for the first time since 97. I think there's zero question that's leading to some of their inefficiencies.
He's got a new defensive coordinator in Blake Seiler, and he's got a new offensive coordinator in Andre Coleman and Colin Klein, who played there. But they just made a change because Coleman was in the booth in the first 2 games. In the last game, they moved him on the field, moved Klein up to the booth. So they're trying to figure it out.
Correct.
And they don't have that figured out yet. Plus, they were unsettled at quarterback. Now it looks like they've settled in on Skylar Thompson. But they have been very unsettled offensively, which is uncharacteristic for K-State because you always knew what they were going to do.
Right. So they have played 3 games. They have played South Dakota. They have played Mississippi State. And they played Texas San Antonio. So, okay, got it. Where do they stand among other Big 12 schools? They are 9th. When it comes to yardage, total yards, they are 9 out of the 10 Big 12 schools. Just to give you a point of comparison, West Virginia, although it's played just 2 games, is at number 3, averaging 586 yards. 586 yards is what West Virginia's averaging, right? K-State averaging 357. This does not spell well for West Virginia, for Kansas State, in the sense that West Virginia is going to score on a bad day. They're going to eclipse 30. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't see how you can, and that's why I go back to history versus this team, because West Virginia went in last year. Will Greer went bananas throwing the ball all over, almost 400 yards passing, so he had success, but West Virginia had one of those spells last year where it didn't score in the second half.
Half didn't score at all.
It did that the year before against Kansas State where it went a half without scoring. So, Tony, I sit back and I look at this and think, how can West Virginia not move the football on Kansas State, struggling at linebacker, struggling in the defensive backfield? They haven't looked good yet. Mississippi State mashed them up front. I don't know how West Virginia doesn't score against this team other than to just rely on, well, they've always struggled against scoring this team, but I just don't see that happening this week.
Mississippi State just ran roughshod over them. They ran for like 400 yards against them. They were penetrating the line of scrimmage offensively and defensively. It looked like a bad mismatch, which nobody expected, even though Mississippi State's pretty good, especially since it was Kansas State. What Kansas State likes to do, and you look at the close games with West Virginia, is I know everybody says that time of possession doesn't matter unless you're playing a team like Kansas State. Yeah. And Kansas State kept it close because they dominated the time of possession. And that's what, if they have any hope at all, it's that they can do that and West Virginia makes the mistakes. But I tell you, if you try to look for a way for Kansas State to win this game, you run out of options here. You don't see a way that just matching up that Kansas State can win this game or even come close to winning this game.
You sound like me now. Where's the Hoppy Kercheval I know?
No, I mean, look at it. Where is the avenue for Kansas State in this game? I don't think they don't have a lot. They don't have a ton of skilled people. Okay, West Virginia's got far more weapons. Defensively, they lost Goolsby, the outstanding cornerback, and a guy Reed, was he the guy last year who was a real good safety?
Returner.
And a returner. And returner, he's gone.
Check this out.
Yeah.
They're unbelievably symmetric. Unbelievably symmetric. This is almost impossible. Ready? Big 12 standings, Big 12 statistics, Big 12 stats. 10 teams. Points, Kansas State, 9th. Yardage, Kansas State, 9th. Passing, Kansas State, 9th. Rushing, Kansas State, 9th. First downs, Kansas State, 9th. Conversions, Kansas State, 9th. Return yardage, Kansas State, 9th. Kicking, Kansas State, 9th. Red zone, Kansas State, 9th. Turnovers, Kansas State, 9th. Penalties, Kansas State, 9th. Defensively, Kansas State, 9th. Mississippi State.
So you're saying they're 9th?
I think they're
sounds like it.
They're kind of a 9th.
Who's 10th?
They're kind of a 19th. Iowa State's 10th in a lot of those categories.
It's not Kansas anymore.
And where that should be particularly alarming to them is they're not just 9th. They're 9th playing two teams on that schedule that aren't worth a lick. Shouldn't say about all due respect to South Dakota. They are an FCS program. So two teams on that schedule they should have manhandled, and they're still running 9th in comparison to all the other Big 12 teams.
They and I know that we gave this stat on the last time we talked about this game, but Kansas State, their rush defense so far is 106th in the country, allowing 6 yards per carry. In 2017, they were 13th, allowing 3.6.
K-State's in some serious trouble if West Virginia can run it. I mean, part of those stats, you wonder if they're skewed because Mississippi State ran its quarterback so much. So you're not going to get that from West Virginia. Obviously, Greer's going to try and throw it, and you're going to use the running back. So is their rush defense really that bad, or was it a bad matchup scheme-wise that allowed Mississippi State to eat them up that way?
All right, expectations now for West Virginia. What should we expect? This is a team that played extremely well, really, in each of its first two games. Tennessee and Youngstown State, and now incredibly rested and ready. Will they be a team that's been rested and ready to go, or will they be a team that's rested and rusty? What will we see?
Well, you would think, because last week was not an off week. They didn't treat it like an off week. They practiced. I mean, Gibby talked about practicing for K-State on Thursday of last week. So you would think they'd be ready and champing at the bit. In fact, Dana Holgerson has said that he's worried they might be too hyped. I don't know. I think we overthink that stuff. I think West Virginia's talent level is so superior that they should score a lot of points in this game. And the public thinks that too, or the gamblers think that too, because that line's gone from 14.5 to 16. So the money's been coming in for West Virginia.
I think it just recently popped to 16.5 too. Yeah. So the money is coming in. I'm looking at this. I think with Hoppy, I think West Virginia ultimately wins this game, whether it starts fast or it starts slow and comes on in the second half. But to me, I want to see this West Virginia team come out and shake that rust and start early. Because if you don't start early in this game, that would be 3 for 3 in games when you didn't come out of the gate. Is that starting to be a trend? And as you get into better teams, as West Virginia advances in its schedule, it's not going to want to put itself in a hole or start slowly like that. So can they reverse that trend this week and come out of the gate and jump on K-State early? Because I think if you do, then look out, because this K-State program, let alone team, isn't built to come from behind on you.
And there is a larger question, too, about the program. I mean, Bill Snyder, who turned 79 October 7th, get your cards in the mail, and is revered across the country and revered at Kansas State. The Bill Snyder Family Stadium and all that he's done for that program. And when he was gone, they were terrible. He came back and revived him again. He's been remarkable. But you know how it is. I mean, after a while, there's grumbling, and particularly among the younger people in the fan base there. So you wonder how long Bill Snyder can or should stick around.
When you look at them offensively, while they do have 9 guys coming back, they don't have many guys that when you watch tape make you get scared.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
They have Isaiah Zuber, number 7, as their wide receiver, and he's really, really talented and really, really good. And they've got Alex Barnes, who's their lead running back. But they're not guys that put fear in you. Like, you look at West Virginia. If you were to slap West Virginia tape on and you watch a little bit, you go, ooh, that Sims scares me. That Jennings, man, he scares me. That Sills scares me. What did that number 1 do against Tennessee? He went down the sideline. That Simmons guy, he scares me. And then you see...
Wait, is that their third running back they just brought in?
Yeah. And then you see Brown, and you see Pettaway, and you see McCoy, and then even a little Sinkfield in there. You go like, you don't see the weaponry that you see with West Virginia when you watch K-State.
So don't you go back. That's what I said in our first podcast this week. That's why I look at this, if you're West Virginia, as a little bit of a litmus test here. You've struggled with this program offensively, even though last year you, in essence, had names are a little bit different, Tony, but it was the same firepower last year, and you stalled out against them. Can you come in this game when you're clearly better from an offensive standpoint? Just take that side of the ball. Can you light up this Kansas State team, hang 40 on them, and you start to move to the rest of the Big 12 schedule? I don't know why you couldn't. If you can, I'm concerned for this
Tony,
team.
you're talking about weapons and the dearth of weapons on K-State, and also they have a tight end, Nick Lenners, who was hurt before the season began. He was going to be their starting tight end, so he's done. So they've had injuries, and you're right, Bo. You just don't see guys that you're really like, oh my gosh, you got to worry about this guy. Whereas on the other side of the ball, there's a lot of guys from West Virginia you have to be concerned about.
West Virginia played one good quarter last year at Manhattan. Mm-hmm. They scored 21 in the third quarter, and they led it 7-6 at the end of one. They led it 28-20 at the end of the half, and the reason they scored, they had that lead at the half, was because of that heroic Will Greer pass to Karan White in the end zone.
Set up by the Zeke Rose pick.
Right. Ezekiel Rose off the turnover.
Which you don't say very often, Hoppy. You don't see the defensive lineman getting many
Not
picks.
very often.
No, he's stuck right in there. So the game is 28-20 at halftime. No scoring third quarter. K-State gets a field goal in the fourth quarter, and that was it. So 28-23. Dana Holgorsen said during his press conference this week that he really liked that game in the sense of his sideline. He thought that offense, defense, special teams, like everyone was just wired in and together as to what was transpiring during the game. He felt a good vibe, if you understand what I'm saying there. Like everyone was buying into, okay, this is what we need. It was like a chess match. It was tight. And the question that I have is, if you're going to be a contender for this championship, okay, what would the champion level team do when the other team comes to your place, right? Like you're saying.
Yeah, you'd run them out of the gym.
You'd run them out of you'd leave no doubt that when it was over with, that whoa, that wasn't even close. That's what you need to do, because the way things are trending, and again, it's early. The way things are trending right now, K-State is probably going to be a 5 or below finisher in the league, so you have to lay wood on them if in fact you are in that upper crust.
And to add to that, you're also getting them early. So they traditionally improve as they move along. You saw that last year. They got a little jump start even in a loss to West Virginia. They then go on the road, get a win over Oklahoma State at Skylar Thompson's one win on the road as starting quarterback. So this program generally has gotten better, the mark of a great coach in Bill Snyder. You're also getting them at a great time at home. So in addition to athlete advantage, West Virginia, you have a situational advantage too in my mind.
They got a tough road to hoe. They got West Virginia, then they got Texas, and Texas is back.
Well,
Yeah,
we
they
can see his shirt.
Texas.
Just look at his shirt. You could see he knows Texas is back.
Then they're at
Wrong color,
Baylor,
orange.
so
Same thing.
But then they have Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, TCU. They finished with Kansas, Texas, Iowa State. So the back end is easier on their schedule. But I think it's going to be tough for them to get to 6. I really do.
All right.
They're going to have to play a lot better than they've been playing to get to 6. I do hope that they do get to kick a field goal and make it, because their new field goal kicker, Blake Lynch, is 5'5", 145.
He's not 5'5".
And when he makes it, the snapper, who's like 6'8", comes in and holds his hand up, and Blake Lynch has to jump up and high-five him. So I just hope they do get 3, and we get to watch that high-five.
He's not 5'5". We're just saying, I can't wait to warm up, so I got to see this. He's a little guy.
He's been pretty good. He's like 6 of 7 or something.
6 of 7, yeah. And he made 4 1/2 in a game this year, and that earned him a scholarship. So
they've done okay, I guess, on special teams, but they lost their kicker, their punter, their
top
return guy, their snapper. They lost everybody.
Yeah, this is clear advantage. And, this hasn't happened maybe ever when anybody plays Kansas State, but West Virginia's got the more continuity on the staff. We talked about the 2 new coordinators earlier, but there's another advantage for West Virginia. Offensive, defensive coordinator, head coach back. Kansas State does not have that. You got to go back about 7 decades to find that with Bill Schneider. So another advantage, West Virginia.
What makes you happy Saturday when the game is over from what you see from West Virginia?
What makes me happy?
What do you have to see? What do you want to see?
That West Virginia dominates, not just wins, but dominates and scores in the 40s and controls the line of scrimmage and just this should not be like the last 2 games with Kansas State. And if it is, then you're going to go like, oh, you're going to say, well, now you got some questions.
Yeah.
You got some questions. So I don't know what the score would be, but I mean, the line keeps going up. But a game where West Virginia dominates, and it's really, even if it's close early on, you still don't have a question that West Virginia's going to win the game.
Senator, what do you want Saturday?
I agree with Hoppy.
Why don't we agree?
Shockingly agree
Why don't we
with
agree
you.
on
I don't know.
everything
I got to
today?
find something to disagree with you about. You're shockingly, well, you're just right today for once. So I'll niche it down even further, and at the risk of echoing what he said, I think this should be a nice test for this West Virginia defensive line. We just mentioned how veteran this Kansas State offensive line is. They haven't got it together yet. We think West Virginia's defensive line is pretty good. Can they go out and dominate? I'm with you. West Virginia should score 40-plus on the offensive side. Let's watch the defense here, because this isn't a dynamic Kansas State offense. Can this defense show some improvement and keep the Wildcats in check? I'm going to watch that on Saturday.
Thank goodness Jesse Ertz is not back for his 9th year. We'd have real problems.
Or good thing Colin Klein's in the box instead of running all over Mountain.
Yeah, Colin Klein's
Field
back with him. He's their
he's a
co-offensive coordinator.
Co-OC. Shea Campbell of Morgantown High, Exree Lowe as well. They'll get more snaps this week at that strong side linebacker. This is not a game that would be perfectly fit for Giovanni Stewart. Next week, Giovanni Stewart will play a lot at strong backer, because Texas Tech runs 13 receivers on every play. So this week you're going to see Shea Campbell try to track down Alex Barnes, among others, back there. All right, let's jump in now to, real quick, let's do a little lightning round here. Other Big 12 action this weekend. In Ames, Iowa, where the campus is dealing with the tragic murder of one of its student athletes this week, they host Akron. Zips and Terry Bowden are 2-0. Iowa State stands at 0-2. The line on the game is almost 20, favoring the Cyclones. Bubble burst here for
I know
Akron?
that Akron's pretty good, but that's a lot of points. Just Iowa State. I mean, if you're Iowa State, just get a win. Just get a win.
I think this, and I know you're not even going to engage in this game. I say this: Akron's been on the road to Nebraska week 1, didn't play the game. Then they went to Northwestern, did play the game. Then they went out, and now they got to go back to Ames, Iowa. At some point, enough is enough, and they probably get train wrecked.
They're just in a traveling bus.
They're like one of these basketball,
like Marathon Oil.
Yeah,
the old Marathon Oil.
They're like those schools that start. They're like those schools that start the basketball season. They come into the Coliseum and say, "Yeah, we don't come home until like December 28th. We're going to play 13 in a row on the road." That's how they make their budget.
They're like the generals who play the Globetrotters. Just like stay on the road.
If Akron were to win, whoa, I don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, so here we go. Kansas at Baylor. Now, before the season started, you looked at this game and you went, like, okay, yeah, we're playing against Baylor. You're not going to pay. But it becomes an intriguing game.
It does.
Ride the Jayhawk momentum train.
They can't win 3 in a row. I mean,
they won 2 in a row.
They won 2 in a row. Win 3 in a row.
You have been so disrespectful to this Kansas football program all season long.
You're right.
I tell you, Duke
Pooka power. Pooka power. That's what's going to get you.
He might be for real.
You see what Duke did to
Baylor?
Baylor?
Might be for real.
I mean, now Duke. I mean, Kansas isn't Duke, but you saw what Duke did to Baylor.
Yeah,
maybe they're getting it going.
Give me David Cutcliffe if we're talking about which coach do you want there. I'll take Cutcliffe. Thank you.
So you're taking Baylor?
No, yeah. Okay.
I'm just looking ahead.
I'm taking Kansas.
What time's that game? Do I have to pay attention to that on Saturday?
You're absolutely. We're watching that game.
3:30. You'll have them simultaneously.
Oh, boy. Perfect.
So, my question is this: what if Kansas were to win? What if Kansas? No, I'm just saying. What would that mean if Kansas were to win, and they're sitting there and they are now? What would that make them? That would make
3-0.
3-1 because they got beat by.
They'd be ecstatic. David Beatty's agent would be on the phone to Jeff Long, and Matt Rule would have his head buried in the sand. But Rule would be beside himself at Baylor.
If Kansas wins, it's early. Does David Beatty save his job?
That's why I say if you're Jeff Long, you don't root for losses as the AD, right? You don't want to root for losses. But I can't imagine Jeff Long wants to continue down the path they're continuing. But if the guy wins a game, now you're going to go in and fire a guy that has shown clear progress, and maybe you're about to get back to Mediocreville there. That's a tough decision for Jeff Long.
If he beats Baylor and Kansas State, does he save his job?
Might have to.
Reverse that. I mean, what's that mean for Kansas State if Kansas beats them?
Well, that's a big problem. Let me ask, unless Jeff Long's got somebody in his hip pocket that he knows will be a good coach, you might have to keep your job if you win a couple there if you're David Beatty.
Next up, TCU and Texas.
Increase winning by like 300%.
If you're David Beatty, say, what else do you want me to do here? I'm showing clear progress. I just needed time.
I get $50K every time I win a game.
I just needed time. Yeah, he'll make $8 million this year if they win 5 games. He'll make more than Saban. Ridiculous contract.
TCU, Texas. The line has shrunk now to just 3, favoring the Horned Frogs.
So this is a fun one here because is this a flat spot letdown for TCU coming off of the Ohio State game? Flip side, you wouldn't think TCU would have a letdown against Texas, the brand they want to beat the most. Here's some numbers for you. Tom Herman, as a head coach, 10-1 against the spread as a dog. That's at Houston and at Texas. 10-1 against the spread as a dog. The flip side story to that, and I'm going to mess these numbers up a little bit, but TCU against Texas the last 4 meetings, it's like 153-52 they've outscored them. They have locked the Texas offense up incredibly well. So you've got the analytics tell you kind of ride with Herman here and see if he can hold. The eyeball test in history tells you, no way. TCU rebounds and gets up for Texas, and they've throttled this offense over the last 4 years.
Texas, to me, is too unpredictable, and TCU is just, I think they're a better program today. Go with TCU.
Yeah, interesting game for a bunch of different reasons.
Even though Texas is back.
Until Monday when we say they're not back.
Army at Oklahoma, 31 is the line, and obviously that's the only story is going to be what the final score is going to be.
But you know what? But, Army is, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying that after the game last week, there were questions, again, resurfaced about Oklahoma's defense. And Army's pretty good. They wear you down. So how many points does Army score on this Oklahoma defense?
Okay,
why don't we watch that?
It's a good number to watch. That's a good storyline there.
So not outcome, but what's Army able to do offensively? And lastly,
good one.
West Virginia's next opponent, the Red Raiders of Texas Tech, who may shock you that they currently lead the Big 12 in rushing touchdowns. How about that one? Texas Tech on the road at Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys are favored by 2 touchdowns.
That the side isn't the most interesting. Go ahead and give us an over-under number there.
What's the over-under?
77.
Yeah, 77. And I think you take the over there.
Would you?
You have Texas Tech that threw for the freshman quarterback threw for a Big 12 freshman record 605 yards. They're going to chuck it. They're going to score points. You've been watching Oklahoma State, and at least I have been saying, is their offense really what it's been the last couple of years? It has looked like it is so far, right? And you're playing against a defense that doesn't stop anybody. 77's a monster number, but do you ride the over here?
Boy, I just did some quick math. 47 to 38.
That's not unreasonable for these two teams.
Would be 85 points. I mean, that's not. I mean,
Is
that's
that
not
unreasonable
That's
for
not a
these
crazy
teams?
score, right?
I would go the other way. I'd be shocked if it wasn't that or higher.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't going to be a 28-24 coming down to a late drive.
I'd go. I'd definitely go the over on that.
It's a big weekend because this is when, after this weekend is over, this is when I start to feel that I've got a good feel on these teams. I think anything's still open for grabs right now. I don't know yet, but after this weekend, then I'll fail and say, okay, we can say that team, they're terrible. That team is the deal. After this weekend.
The schedule's so screwy in these non-conferences. Oklahoma State not playing anybody. Kansas State hasn't played anybody other than Mississippi State, and they look terrible. So, yeah, I think as you start to normalize and play Big 12 competition, you can get an idea here.
You do, but I always come back. It's not like the old Big East where there's some teams that you just knew that you were going to thump because you have better talent.
Shout out to Rutgers.
You have better talent, you have better coaching, and you can let down a little, but you can't let down too much.
Right.
And you're on the road and places.
Well,
and
especially if Kansas is getting better. I don't think Kansas is in a position to beat an Oklahoma or West Virginia, but now at least you have to. What's Pooka Williams doing over there? So they're an example of that.
Pooka power, baby. Pooka power.
2 mentions for Pooka on
I
this.
know.
And it's not even Kansas week.
Love me some Pooka. All right, we are out.
Kansas.
Thanks, everyone, for being with us.
Story so far.
We appreciate you. Share the word. Spread the podcast. We're back on Monday with another edition of Three Guys Before the Game. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
You can't